Thank you all. So we are already a few minutes late, but let's start again, please. We have online attendees as well. About 100 people are attending online. So let's move into the third topic of this first session, forest. Forest, as I said, was really a trigger for the association. When we initiated the Green Deal Working Group, and we really started to work on the forest. It was a priority because of the timing and the legislative train. It has been a trigger because so many companies were deeply interested to contribute to this. So for us, because of the initial start, but as well achievement performed by the working group, it's a really a topic we are proud to discuss today again. So forest, they are complex ecological system facing numerous challenges. With the forest strategy, the European Union aims at improving the quality and the quantity of Europe's forest by 2030. How can Earth observation contribute to this effort? Our moderator, Ms. Irene Benito, chair of the Earth Forest Management Working Group, will address this question and many more with our speakers. We have Mr. Saminke, Deputy Head of Unit Low Carbon Solution, again, from DG Climate Action, thank you. Ms. Inge Jonclear, Team Leader Satellite Land Monitoring System, FAO. Ms. Helen Koch, from Policy Advisor, Confederation of European Private Forest Owners. Ms. Johanna Nowakowska, System Performance Director at the Forest Stewardship Council, and Mr. Basanta Gautam, Manager at the Red Plus Technical Innovation at Vera. Irene, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Great, so thank you everyone for joining us today on our forest session. Unfortunately, 3 of the panelists are joining virtually, but we'll be able to hear from them too. And as Emmanuel kindly introduced the session, we're going to be talking about forests. We're first going to recognize the enormous effort that the European Union is really taking and the leadership that we have in climate action with the Green Deal, but also within our fight against environmental decline. I think Europe is really demonstrating enormous leadership in the area of forest protection, both inside and outside of Europe. We have, again, as Emmanuel already mentioned, the EU forest strategy, and we have a series of regulations and policies that are coming from there, starting from the EU deforestation file, which has been approved recently and will come into effect more or less in the next 18 months. It's still, I think, pending the publication in the official journal. And we also have the new EU framework for forest monitoring, which the Commission is working on at the moment and still needs to be proposed. And these are, as I said, extremely incredible regulations, and Europe is showing great leadership. But why are we, from the Earth observation community, why is Expandeo involved in the topic of forests? Earth observation data, Earth observation services have been working on the sustainable management, on the monitoring of forest health, on topics such as deforestation for many decades. And this is because EO data from optical, from radar satellites is extremely well suited to monitor the health of forests, to detect changes in near real time, and also to provide a global and harmonized visibility over large areas. And as you know, forests normally cover very large areas. And for this reason, we have a great plethora of very advanced and very useful services that build on this data. And we're actually, Europe and many of you in the room here today have been showing great leadership globally in terms of useful forest systems. And that's why we are so excited for the Commission to include Earth observation data and services within forest regulation and forest policy, starting from the forest strategy, and more recently, as I already mentioned, with the EU deforestation regulation, where Europe has really shown incredible ambition and leadership. On the ambition side, really trying to make an enormous step forward as the first bloc in the world to really try to stop deforestation inside and outside of the borders of our union, but also in terms of the implementation of the regulation, really being able to put and match this ambition with credible tools. And at the heart of these tools is Earth observation. And I think that's a great, great success for the European Union, leveraging technological advancements from perhaps not as obvious sectors as we are with respect to forest policy. So, without further ado, I think I will hand over to the fellow panelists, which come from a diverse range of backgrounds, and I think we'll learn quite a lot from their different points of view of how Earth observation can help empower forest policy in Europe. So starting with Simon from DG Klima, maybe Simon, you can say a few words about yourself and your work.
Okay, so I'll try not to repeat myself from a bit earlier, but okay. So I'm in DG Klima, so I'll come back to the regulations under our dossier, under our file, if you like. And yeah, so I'm a remote sensor by background, but that's a long time since I worked in academia, but I've tried through my career to make sure that we use this tool in the different policy areas I've worked in. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Simon. And maybe we can move to Inge from UN FAO, who is joining us virtually. Inge, I don't know if you can hear us.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear? So my name is Inge Onkere. I'm the team of the satellite land monitoring systems in the forestry department of the nation's FAO, so the Food and Agriculture Organization. Leading the work is 15 years, working on the monitoring mainly in developing countries. I have a background as well as remote sensing from the University of Leuven, where I was a guest lecturer. So nice to meet you all, and thanks to be me on this panel.
Thank you, Inge. Let's go now with Hélène. Hélène, tell us a bit about you.
So good morning, everybody. So my name is Hélène Koch. I'm a forester by training, but I focus most towards forest policy and EU forest-related policy.
Great, thank you. Joanna, another colleague joining us virtually.
Thank you very much, Irene. Nice to be here. I'm Joanna Nowakowska. I am System Performance Director and Forest Stewardship Council. I'm also a forester, and I used to practice GIS in my forestry work. Few years in FST I spent in technology and information unit, leading also the innovation team where we were building GIS capacity in our headquarters. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And finally, we have Basanta from Vera.
Hi all, thank you very much. I'm indeed Basanta Gautam. I work as a manager at Plus Technical Innovation Manager in Vera. And I'm responsible for creating data, activity data, and forest cover maps using EU. We'll be discussing this in this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we are moving to the question and answer section, and then between the panelists, and of course then we'll open to the audience, both online and virtually. So Simon, of course, we start with you. We, as I said, we are thrilled from the community to see that the Commission is leveraging the latest technology advancements for the protection of forests outside and inside of Europe with the deforestation regulation. We are now moving to the EU framework, new framework for forest monitoring. And we're now looking into European forests in more details. How can we learn from the success or from any kind of lessons that we can draw from the deforestation regulation and also obstacles in the integration of EO for the new regulation?
Okay, so thanks so much. And it's indeed important to look at the context of, the different I would say, shades of regulatory proposals that have come forward in the last few years and how indeed they're picking up on the remote sensing and Earth observation as a tool. And before we talk about the success of the deforestation regulation, it's even, I think you mentioned, not even quite yet published. It'll probably come out, I guess, in the next few days in the official journal. It was published yesterday, right? That shows that it's actually a file that's headed by DG Environment, not DG Klima, but indeed we're very interested in that. But a key point, I think, is the dynamic, is that what has changed enormously is that the dynamic of the information that is needed is completely different now when we talk about forests compared to 10 or 20 years ago, let alone 30, 40 years ago. So we're well aware, I won't talk too much about it, I think there are other panelists, of course, who will look at the more global side of deforestation. But we've been more and more interested for climate as well as the obvious biodiversity element related to deforestation in land use change from forest to other land. So that's called deforestation in the general mindset of everyone here, I'm sure. But following that closely means that you need timely information. You need to know where things are happening. Now, the deforestation regulation has a particular focus. It talks about really products that come from the land derived that are deforested, and sets out a means of discouraging, if you like, that land will be deforested, because then it will not be eligible for a product to be placed on the market. But it's a bit more subtle than just suddenly it's no longer a forest. There's also a degradation issue with the land that needs to be followed up. And these all require very, first of all, a synoptic view of where change is taking place, and then also this quantification element that I was describing earlier, and understanding the dynamic of the landscape. And that's a bit similar for climate as well, because we have already from 5 years ago, the original LULUCF regulation from 2018, 841, in case you want to look it up, talked about land use change, land use conversion needing to be followed at, in fact, it's really the minimum unit of the forest area determined by each member state. So under the LULUCF regulation, it's the member state that determines it. Under the deforestation regulation, it's a half hectare. Now, that means, again, that we need to look at this kind of information to understand the land use change. And while you can pick that up by going on the ground, you're going to miss quite a lot of it, because if you go and visit standard points every 5 years or so, then you will not pick up land that is changing so dynamically. So a combination really is really needed for the climate side. I think that also bear in mind, of course, we all know Earth observation combined with in situ data is absolutely crucial. I think it was mentioned by Patrick Worms earlier that this is crucial for soil. It's just as crucial for forest. It's just as crucial for agriculture. So combining these data sets and improving them and making them timely is the key. And that's what we're trying to do really with the proposals that come out, whether they're certification, deforestation, LULUCF, trying to basically optimize what we have available in front of us.
Thank you, Simon. And Inge, in case there's some issue with your connection, you can also turn off your camera. We'll see your picture. But I wanted to move to you, Inge, because Simon just mentioned how the new regulation, especially building on LULUCF, will look more, of course, at implementation at the national level and member state work. And of course, at FAO, you've been working with nations for many years on forest management, and you've been leveraging commercial and public data for that purpose. Can you tell us a bit more about the lessons that you think you've drawn from that work, and what Europe can do at the moment when we're facing this new European level regulation?
Yes. Well, thank you very much. And also thank you, Simon, for this very nice introduction to all this, because indeed, we've been working in many developing countries on the national forest monitoring. So first of all, what Europe can do, and as with the European deal, I think Europe does already a lot, given that it's so much data and all with all these slides. For example, if we look at the Sentinels and the Copernicus data, that's really key and crucial to all the work we do, which do in a cooperation manner with these developed countries. So this is already a huge achievement, and I think we're aligned to head further with this, given that more and more climate, for example, initiatives and services are done there. But as you mentioned, so we have public data, but also the commercial data plays a role. So, for example, FAO had an agreement thanks to the government of Norway with plant data, which really fills gaps. So as said, the monitoring, so we need to have the land use changes, as said, also deforestation, but degradation is a very big one also because, for example, there it's harder to see what's the real definition of degradation. We still have workshops on this to define what the degradation actually is. But basically, they really do have a role there. One of the key things for us, especially in developing countries, of course, is sustainability. So if we start having dependencies on commercial data with really high expensive contracts, that's of course not very, let's say, sustainable. But in a way, also for the reporting that we have CCC, sometimes countries really rely on commercial data to get a baseline, and from there, they move on with public data. So this is also one of the applicants we've seen to be extremely useful. So in that sense, also what you can do, there's a wide variety of all these academia, research centers, which come up with a lot of tools and toolboxes. And this is also extremely useful. As you know, also for the observation data, as said by Simon, I also started in the 90s, so there was another ball game. Now there's so many people working with the data, which are hardcore experts, but who really can use it. So in that sense, very user-friendly interfaces and make, as said before, open data freely available. I think that's extremely useful key. And then linked also what Simon was saying, I think for the early warning, and that's the thing where we look into more, as there's so many extreme events linked to the climate change. So for that, observation is key. Together, of course, with INS data, as said before, it's not only on Earth observation data, apart from in developing countries where, for example, there's not such a strong history of the field services like we, for example, have for the national forest inventories in Europe. But so that's really something to look into. So I think it's a really combination of both. We do see that the commercial data is really fitting the where we need to fill them. Thank you.
Thank you, Inge. And I think that, of course, I didn't make that question by chance. We, coming as industry, see that really the power of the solutions that we're building rely on both the incredible wealth that we have from public data sources, from Landsat, from Copernicus, but of course also from the complementary missions that industry helps provide. So Inge has spoken a bit about the power of VO, and I would like to hear a bit more, Ellen, about your view of how Earth observation can help forest owners in Europe, because I guess that you're looking very closely to forest regulation that is coming up, and it's not only public forests, it's also private forests. What do you think Earth observation can do for forest owners? What do you think are the opportunities, the expectations of new regulations, and the role of VO there? Tell us.
Thank you. Well, first, in terms of context, for those of you which are not familiar with the EU forest landscape, 60% of the EU forests are in private hands, so that's quite significant, and 42% of the EU land area is forested, so that's quite a big chunk. And the 60% of private forests are in the hand of more or less 15 million individuals. So that's a lot of people, and it means that not only, Europe, diversity of forests, but also diversity of people. And so it's always very difficult to answer to what is the concern of the forest owner, because, well, I cannot answer that. That really depends. It depends which one, in which context, in which country. Is he living from his forest? Is she living far away from that forest? So that's first, like in terms of pure context, something to really keep in mind about that diversity. And it's the same, like I made a quick internal survey before coming. And in terms of the use of Earth observation, it goes from nothing, like, well, not really. Like, I do have a map. My forest is 5 minutes away from where I live, and it's half a hectare. So I am in no need of Earth observation data. I just walk there every morning, and I know exactly where I am. To the other opportunity that the forest is bigger, further away, and also not to be taken into account that private forest ownership is usually a heritage thing. So it's usually in the hand of an older generation, which is more or less fluent with technology. So that's also something like, user-friendliness of an app might not be sufficient. You may have the most user-friendly if the person doesn't even own a smartphone. They're not in your business opportunity at all. So that's something, but that's very pragmatic, but that's what we look at. And then when it comes to what could be interesting, it depends also about, okay, but who's for? Am I looking at Earth observation from a forest owner perspective that needs to take care of its management? And here, having your forest management plan on an Earth observation app that you have on your phone, very interesting. And it exists already, for that, Finland is first of the class, I may say, or at least in the top of the class. So I'm not insulting anyone. But that you have very advanced thing, but that's forest owner level. And then you have regional, national, European level, and the question is also, what for? And for us, this is the biggest question for the upcoming, more than likely, regulation on the forest monitoring, is what for? Because in the foreseen indicator among the public consultation, there is a lot of indicator which relate to existing legislation, but there are also other indicators which are not at the moment addressed in any type of legislation. So it's also like, what's the added value? And then you end up in the last point is added value, but also is it meaningful? You may have data that are not of relevance at a broader level, or just you can compare them, but the comparing of the amount of deadwood that you have in Spain, or in Finland, or in Austria, it doesn't bring any added value. The forests are so different, the context is so different that, yes, you can put the number next to each other, but you're not learning anything. So it's also like really, at which scale is it meaningful to look at the data? And then, and this is something that we're very happy to see the Commission putting forth, is for us, Earth observation are an immense opportunity, but there should go hand in hand in field data to proof check, to make sure that there is no misinterpretation, no misleading claim. We had the case a few years back, and I still hear about it, about over-harvest of EU forests. Well, you know, the technology changed and there was some modeling issue. It happens. But I'm still, you know, being asked the same question 3-4 years afterwards. So that's very important also, that there is a thorough check with what's happening on the ground. And with all that being said, I haven't touched yet on the data privacy question. If I'm able to know how many rooms you have in your house, should I know it? It's not because you can know it that it should be known or shared, but that's a wider question. And I'll stop here.
Thank you, Ellen. And I am so excited to have her here today because, of course, we are all completely convinced. We're so excited about the solutions that we can provide. You know, we're providing transparent, harmonized, objective data that it's a no-brainer. And I think talking to forest owners, you know, over 60% of European forests is very important so that we really have a debate, understand concerns, and really build solutions that will be taken up because, of course, it's an opportunity for us to create impact, but also business. So, Hélène, I hope that we'll be able to continue interacting with you within our group, the Green Deal. But Simon, very quickly, that's how we are going to deal with the concerns of forest owners. How is the Commission considering European forest owners' concerns in regulation drafting around forests?
Okay, thanks so much. So I'm glad that Hélène pointed out the stakeholder consultation and the fact that it goes wide and broad. I mean, obviously, it wouldn't make any sense to just consult on 3 parameters that we all know that have to be done. So that's why it's wide and broad. And there will be things in there, of course, that make it through to the proposal. There will be things that, of course, that we've dropped along the wayside. And I want to emphasize as well that I don't think anybody in the remote sensing community believes that they can use that tool without understanding what is on the ground by collecting data on the ground. So that's often I'm not addressing this at you, but I know that it's a false dialogue that's taken place a lot about has to be one or the other. I think I mentioned several times today. It needs to pull both of these streams together. What I think is more complicated and that we have to try to address is that traditionally we've measured things in a certain way, which gives us a certain view on a forest stand, for example, whether it's the volume, the growth rate, etc. Which, by the way, often member states go back on their ground surveys and do recalculations based on new measurement techniques. So we need to reconcile what we've done in the past with the needs that we have in the future. And I keep underlining those from the perspective of DG Klima. They're related to climate, but there are other needs too. Biodiversity, of course, is one of them. And we have to try to find a way to make them fit for purpose for the future. So it's not a question that, I don't know, the area of forest is wrong. It's a question of what area of forest do we need for what we have for what policy in the future. And I fully understand, you know, a family that has a 5 hectares split between 14 cousins has a very different perspective from a large enterprise or even a large advisory group working with a collective of owners. So let's try to choose the right tools and make things work the best they are. And indeed find a way to make ownership of forests resilient for the future, because it's going to be a big challenge to keep forests up, let's say, up, running, productive, and alive in the future with the changes that we're pretty much going to be seeing. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon. And I think this makes for another very good lunchtime conversation. What do we do with all the data that we have in forest inventories? How do you make sure that we use that data as training data, that it's not lost, and that it just enhances the new measurement tools that we have? Another story. But I think the other hot topic of the day is definitely the topic of certification. And we have the great pleasure of having two experts from the field joining us today. And I think it would be great, maybe starting with Basanta, to get a bit of a perspective of what is the role of certification in forest policy and what can Earth observation bring to the certification process. Do you want to start, Basanta, please?
Yes, Irene, thanks. There is one presentation, if it is possible to display, please. There is one slide. But let me, please go to next slide in the interest of time. Yeah, so in this slide, so slide is not very nicely visible to my end, but what I'm trying to show here is that Vera is working on the new RED methodology. We have existing 5 RED methodology, and we are consolidating them into one. One of the main motivations of this consolidation is also the advancement on the remote sensing side and the data availability, and then the cost of the data, and even the freely available data. So as you can see here, we start with this establishing jurisdictional baseline activity data. So we already start using Earth observation data from the beginning. And then in this case, we create 2 data sets. One is forest cover map, so we say it forest cover benchmark map, and another is forest deforestation related activity data. And the recommendation that we have is 10 to 30 meter from the fact that we have Landsat for all the years, that is of 30 meter, and Sentinel after 2015. But this is the minimum requirement, and we are encouraging the project proponent and developer to use the high resolution data, for example, planet data for especially for area-based sampling. And once we have this forest cover benchmark map and activity data that is coming from the Earth observation data analysis, we establish a jurisdictional deforestation risk map, because we know that not all the forest in a jurisdiction is equally risky for future deforestation. What we want to, from the red perspective, what we want to see is that where in the jurisdiction the forest is very risky for future deforestation. So for that, we use like one of the criteria is distance to forest edge. And once we map the deforestation risky area in the jurisdiction, and then we allocate activity data, deforestation related activity data to the VCS project, so that the project proponent and the developer can take it forward and apply the project specific emission factors. And after that, they have to monitor. So this baseline, the validity period is of 6 years right now. And the project proponent have to monitor and report accordingly. And for that also, they have to use Earth observation data. So just to highlight that there are different stages in our process that we are using Earth observation data. And again, also there is an opportunity to submit available data from other stakeholders. So, and especially linking to the EU deforestation regulation, this is also important because it relates to the RED, because the RED countries have been blaming the developed countries are using the product that are coming from the deforestation area in these RED countries. So I think this is nicely fitting with what we are doing in Vera and the EU deforestation regulation. And quickly, next slide, please. Just this is my just last slide, and this is just that as you asked about the process of this registration and issuance. So this slide shows how the process of project registration and how the VCU, we say VCU in Vera, and it is like similar to RED credit. So this process shows how this registration and issuance goes in the process. With this, I stop here and I welcome for any questions.
Thank you, Basanta. We have, I think, a bit of time at the end, hopefully. I think, of course, what Basanta has shown to us is that Earth observation can play a role in certification just by its transparent/objective nature. And Joanna, I know that FSC is also working on the topic of certification. Maybe you can tell us a bit your perspective there, what it can do also in terms of the EU forest strategy, for example, given that it has not been part of the deforestation regulation. What are your views on that, Joanna?
Thank you very much, Irene, and thanks to all. Let me first give you a 30-second introduction to FSC system and what we actually do. So what we essentially do is to develop voluntary standards. Some of them are for forest managers, and some of them are for supply chain actors that are processing wood coming from certified forest and producing the end product that you can see on the shelf. And if a forest manager is interested in certification, they will implement our standard, and the independent body will come, check them on the ground, and issue or not issue the certificate. So the same logic, of course, applies to supply chain actors, the implementation, the check, and the certificate or no certificate. So in terms of Earth observation, it plays a very significant role for our system. And I will mention and focus here on 3 key applications, which are corresponding to the ambitions included in the forest strategy. And just before I move to those 3 points, I would like to stress that the main link between FSC and the forest strategy is that we have essentially the same objective: promotion of sustainable forest management and increasing the recognition of forest as a value for future generations. So back to applications of EO technology. First one is exactly for those field checks, for auditing. So we cannot expect that auditor will look at every corner of certified forest, especially those ones that are large, and I alluded to fact of differences of the sizes very well. But auditor can be provided with tools to look at this forest from the sky and see different applications of EO through exploring forest disturbances, forest health, and many other impressive analytics that this technology offers. So it, of course, cannot replace the field check, and this is also something that my previous speakers were alluding to, because the ground truthing is something that makes the best use of EO observation, but still is a very essential and important tool to make and streamline auditing at the scale and reduce the effort both for auditors and also for forest managers that needs to accommodate those auditors on the ground. Second, EO is absolutely crucial for our monitoring and evaluation, to proving that we are making any difference. So on one side, we are here absolutely dependent on geospatial data to maintain the right level of transparency by publishing maps of our certified forest if we have consents from respective forest managers. But equally importantly, we use Earth observation and the data, geospatial data, to conduct performance evaluations of our certified areas. And most importantly, to do these evaluations at a scale, which is a challenge for every global organization. And in our case, we are speaking about 80 plus countries and more than 210 million hectares of certified forests. We are working in this effort with the top players, and we are very grateful for engagement from really key industry representatives in this area. And finally, the third one, which will be speaking a little bit to what Inge was referring to. EO is a perfect tool for sharing information about forests and what is happening in there with regular users. And this particular communication advantage is something that we are very much trying to build on and expanding our monitoring and activities, as well as digital transformation by producing easy tools, easy explanatory materials about our systems, showing the difference that we are making and sharing more information about the forest and state of certified forest with regular users. And this awareness is the key to make real change, and it's essential also and mentioned and stressed in forest strategy that we need to engage with stakeholders, and only through engagement with stakeholders in development and implementation we can actually generate true impact beyond any tools, being it certification or legislative measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this session. I know that you loved it, but I think it would be great to give all of the speakers a very, very short opportunity to speak to the sector that you have in front of you. Where should we focus our efforts? We've been developing solutions for forests for decades. if we want to empower the EU forest strategy and upcoming policies, where should we work? And maybe Inge, we start with you, because we haven't heard from you in a while.
Yes. Thank you very much. So I think, as we mentioned, the EU has a great role to fulfill. So first of all, I would say in international cooperation, in the data management, in the data accessibility. But what I do think that we should focus really on is in Europe, we have such a plethora of data, satellite systems, academia, private sector. So I think we should focus on data interoperability, data harmonization, and rather than duplication, really build on all the joint comparative advantages we have. So even already in this panel, we have a plethora of people who could work much more together and harness the work rating. So I think this is the main focus for us in the coming years. There's so much data already, so I don't think it's the data lacking. I think it's what we do with the data, and data only have sense when we get it to an analysis of it. So that would be my home message from this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Inge. Ellen, what do you think?
Very shortly, I would say I fully support what was said in the sense that process what exists already, because in terms of data source, there is an enormous data source, but processes with caution. And my little note to myself was near real time, beware of the headline. And very shortly, I would say, if you look at what is deforestation, it's change of land use. Meaning that if you are in Denmark, and if you do a final felling, you have 10 years for regeneration. So during 10 years, you cannot say this was a change of land use, because for many reasons, your natural regeneration cannot take up, your planting cannot take up. It's like we have a heat wave. So always like take your result with a grain of salt and proof check with the local people.
Thank you, Ellen. I hear too much data, so no more constellations needed for all of you planning to launch. Maybe, Simon, we can move to you.
Yeah, so indeed, things like definitions are very important. So for climate, if you cut your trees and let them grow back, that's not deforestation, often a misconception by many people. So yeah, it's a land use change. But I think the main point I would like to make is that the communities between those who collect data on forest, statistically, and those who collect data with the new tools we have available, those from Earth observation, need to work out how to reconcile their points of view differences, because it's not going to, we don't have much time to sort out problems like climate change, biodiversity, etc. These are really encroaching on us very fast. Just look at the fires and etc. that we have, and we need to deal with it. So we need to sort these problems out fast and work with the data that we have, that we're producing today, and use it very efficiently.
Thank you, Simon. And finally, if we can hear from the certifiers, how can we work together to achieve our forest objectives? Maybe Basanta, you first, and then we finish with Joanna.
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree with all the panelists that they mentioned about these data, importance of the data. One more point I would like to add is that the degradation mapping is one more thing that we need to consider. More research and development is needed. While we have data mainly for deforestation related reporting, but degradation is also equally important, and even in some cases it's more important than deforestation. So definitely, I think working closely and then sharing the data and then using the available data and working for future, related to especially on the degradation mapping would be my takeaway message from this panel. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would like to come back to communication value, because yes, there is a lot of data, there are great scientists being able to use this data, but then so what if we are not able to communicate it? And this is where I see the great value of industry helping, certification schemes, but also everybody that will be involved in implementation of forest strategy, because you need to see to believe. You need to be able to understand the message that is coming from the data. So it's not about data, it's about insights and about communicating those insights to regular users, because we are all, as a consumers, going to pull this off and make the forest strategy and all EU regulations work. So this is very important that we really raise awareness and really bring this technology and this knowledge to the society, and Earth observation is just a perfect tool for that. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think with that we close. Thank you to our fantastic panelists that were here and virtually. And thank you to the audience. And I think for the future, let's make sure that we keep working even closer and we keep fighting the fight. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.